100 years ago, Florence Scovel Shinn said something the world wasn't ready to hear. She didn't speak about money from banks. She spoke about money from the spirit. She said, "Your word is your wand, and what you speak, you summon." Back then, people laughed. They called it nonsense, impractical. But in 2025, millions are realizing she was right all along. The lives of ordinary people are transforming. The broke are becoming bold. The silenced are speaking wealth into existence. Florence didn't give a money plan. She gave a wealth frequency. Say it, believe it, and walk like it's already yours. You're not manifesting. It's already been assigned to you. Florence's words were not magic. They were spiritual law. And if you understand what she said, you'll stop chasing money and start attracting your divine inheritance. For centuries, language has been treated as something ornamental, used to describe things, express emotions, or tell stories. But Florence Scovel Shinn shattered that limited view by declaring, "Your word is your wand." This wasn't poetic fluff. She meant it literally. Your spoken words hold power not just in your environment, but in the unseen spiritual world. In 2025, we now understand this as energy, as frequency, as vibration. Quantum thinkers and spiritual teachers are confirming what Florence tried to tell us 100 years ago. Your words are not just communication, they're commands. When Florence said, "Your word is your wand," she didn't mean you should say things randomly and hope for magic. She meant that your spoken affirmations, declarations, and beliefs actively shape the world around you. Each word carries a frequency, and just like a radio tunes into a specific station, your words tune you into specific outcomes. If you constantly say, "I'm broke," you're tuning into scarcity. If you declare, "Money flows to me freely," you're aligning with abundance. This is why so many people unknowingly stay stuck. They keep speaking their limitations. Words are seeds. Every time you speak, you plant something in the soil of your future. You may not see the result immediately, but energy has already begun to move. Most people are planting weeds of worry, fear, and lack, then wondering why their lives are overgrown with chaos. Florence warned us, don't speak what you don't want. And in today's world, where anxiety and self-doubt are common, it's more crucial than ever to understand the creative force of the tongue. The reason this principle feels uncomfortable is because it holds us accountable. If your words are creating your reality, then you can't blame the system, your job, or your past. You have to examine what you're saying daily. Florence believed in spiritual responsibility, the idea that you must become the guardian of your speech. In 2025, this message is urgent. Social media, news, and culture all train us to speak negativity. But those who master their language master their future. Scientific research is finally catching up. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, and even mainstream neuroscientists now show that thoughts plus emotions plus speech equals neurocreation. Your brain and body literally rewire based on what you repeat out loud. Florence may not have had brain scans or data, but her truth was still accurate. Your word directs your destiny. People often say, "I'm just being honest," when they describe struggle, but Florence would argue, why keep rehearsing the pain? Speak the solution, not the problem. This doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means giving power to what you desire, not what you fear. Your word is your wand, invites you to speak things as if they are already happening, because in the spiritual realm, they already are. Your job is to align. Even the Bible, which Florence referenced often, confirms this. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. That's not symbolism, it's a warning. Are you speaking life over your money, your body, your relationships? Or are you unintentionally speaking decay? Most people are casting spells on their future with sarcasm, self-hate, and despair. But the moment you shift, even slightly, your world begins to rearrange. And here's what Florence knew that many still miss. You don't have to feel powerful to speak powerfully. Your words can lead your emotions. If you're broke, say, "I am abundantly supplied." If you're afraid, say, "I am divinely protected." Your word is not a reflection of where you are. It's a declaration of where you're going. And when you make that your daily habit, the universe must respond, not because it's magic, but because it's law. Florence Scovel Shinn taught a principle that seems simple but is rarely practiced. Clarity attracts provision. She observed that people who were confused, emotionally scattered, or mentally undecided often lived in lack, not because they were lazy, but because their vibration was divided. In her own words, fear and doubt cloud the pathway of demonstration. In 2025, we now realize that wealth isn't just about strategy, it's about energetic alignment. You cannot manifest money from a place of internal disorder. Most people think they have a money problem, but what they actually have is a clarity problem. They don't really know what they want, how much they need, or why they're even chasing it. One week, they want freedom. The next week, want fame. They copy goals from others without asking themselves what feels authentic. Florence would tell you, the universe doesn't deliver based on wishy-washy energy. It responds to bold, specific, faith-filled intention. Clarity is magnetic. It pulls opportunities toward you that match your frequency. When you're clear, you don't chase, you call in. Florence often used affirmations like, "I have a perfect work in a perfect way." Notice how precise that is. Not "I hope something works out," but "perfect way." Now, that kind of focused language sets a direction, and once you set a direction, spiritual law begins to organize the details in your favor. In contrast, chaos repels. A chaotic mind sends mixed signals. I want money, but I hate rich people. I want abundance, but I don't deserve it. I want freedom, but I'm afraid to fail. That's energetic contradiction. And contradiction blocks manifestation. Florence warned, you cannot hold two opposing beliefs and expect spiritual law to work. Either you believe you're guided and supported, or you don't, and the universe responds accordingly. In the modern world, chaos is disguised as hustle culture. People mistake busyness for progress, but being busy without direction is just motion without power. Florence believed you could do less and receive more, if your inner world was aligned. When you are clear on your values, your purpose, and your worth, money begins to show up in unexpected ways, not because you forced it, but because you made space for it. This is why mental and emotional clarity is the true wealth foundation. Most people try to fix money by adjusting numbers, apps, or side hustles. But Florence would ask, have you fixed your frequency first? Because a clear frequency makes you a signal tower for divine supply. That clarity is what separates manifestation from fantasy. Manifestation requires commitment to vision, and you cannot commit to a vision you haven't defined. The clearer you are about what you want, the more aligned your language becomes. You stop saying things like "I hope" or "I'll try." Instead, you start speaking in terms of "I am" and "I receive." You become intentional with your words, actions, and even thoughts. And when your clarity deepens, your results accelerate. Florence didn't need a financial plan. She had spiritual precision. Clarity also helps you detect distractions. Not everything that comes your way is a blessing. Some opportunities are detours designed to test your focus. But when you're clear, you can say no to what doesn't align. Florence believed that what's truly yours cannot miss you. But you must remain spiritually available to receive it. That availability comes from clarity, not confusion. It's important to understand that clarity is not just mental, it's spiritual. It's a deep inner knowing that says, this is who I am. This is what I deserve. And this is where I'm headed. That kind of knowing sends out a frequency that wealth recognizes. Florence often said, man must prepare for the thing he has asked for. Preparation is a sign of clarity. When you start preparing, you're telling the universe, I expect this to happen. Wealth doesn't want to land in a storm. That's why Florence emphasized spiritual discipline. Daily affirmations, meditation, prayer. These aren't just rituals. They are ways to clear mental fog, align with divine truth, and remove energetic resistance. You can't attract prosperity from a state of panic. Calm is currency, clarity is spiritual capital, and those who hold it become natural receivers of grace and supply. Many people are blocked not because they lack talent or effort, but because they lack clarity and identity. Florence taught that you are not merely a body, You are a spiritual being with divine inheritance. When you know that, you stop begging life to give you something, and instead you begin to claim what is already yours. Identity clarity unlocks permission to prosper. Sometimes clarity means subtraction, removing relationships, beliefs, habits, or environments that confuse your energy. Florence encouraged people to cut ties with fear-based thinking, even if it meant leaving jobs, churches, or social circles. She understood that what you tolerate becomes part of your signal, and your signal either attracts wealth or it warns it away. In 2025, clarity has become the ultimate wealth strategy, not just financial clarity, but clarity in language, energy, purpose, and alignment. The world is full of noise, but those who are clear speak with conviction. Florence's wisdom still echoes through time. Money follows clarity, not chaos. It's not about chasing more. It's about clearing the path and letting the divine do the rest. Florence Scovel Shinn taught something truly radical for her time, and still misunderstood in ours. There is no shortage in the spiritual world, no ceiling, no limitation, no competition. Lack, according to Florence, is not a condition created by God, a mental construct programmed by fear, culture, and ego. In her words, man comes into the world financed by God. But instead of living from that truth, we are trained to live in survival. Poverty is not just an economic condition, it's a spiritual distortion. The original blueprint of the soul is abundance. Every tree produces in excess. Every river flows without restraint. Every star radiates endlessly. Nature is extravagant. It over-delivers. Florence believed that the human soul, being a divine expression, is also designed to prosper, naturally, effortlessly, and consistently. It's not that abundance is rare. It's that we've been taught to fear it. By the time most people are adults, they've been bombarded with phrases like, "Money doesn't grow on trees," "You have to work hard for every dollar," "Be realistic," or "That's just how life is." These ideas take root in subconscious and grow into internal ceilings. Florence understood that these beliefs become energetic blocks, cutting off the flow of spiritual supply, not because the supply isn't available, but because the individual has been conditioned to expect limitation. This is why she emphasized spiritual reprogramming. Florence knew that affirmations were not just positive words. They were tools to rebuild the soul's original code. She instructed people to say things like, "There is no competition on the spiritual plane. What is mine by divine right cannot be taken from me." These statements weren't meant to flatter the ego. They were meant to realign the self with divine law. The moment you believe that supply is infinite, everything changes. You stop viewing other people as threats. You stop resenting their success. You realize that someone else receiving a blessing doesn't take anything from you. In fact, it proves what's possible. Florence believed that envy and comparison are just symptoms of spiritual amnesia. When you remember your source, you stop looking sideways and start looking upward. In today's society, scarcity is institutionalized. School systems reward competition. Workplaces preach hustle. The media sells fear. Entire economies are built on lack and control. Florence's message is dangerous to this system, because if people truly knew how abundant they were in spirit, they'd stop obeying fear and start obeying faith, and a person led by faith can't be manipulated. She made a bold statement. Faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly. This means that wealth is first a mindset, then a material experience. When you walk, speak, and think like someone who is already supplied, you activate spiritual law, and when you activate that law, the physical world has no choice but to match your inner belief. Poverty, then, is not an absence of resources. It's an absence of expectation. We are not waiting on God. God is waiting on us, waiting for us to believe. To align, to speak with authority, Florence rejected the idea of just enough. She urged people to expect overflow, ease, and joy, not as fantasies, but as normal spiritual conditions. Her affirmations were unapologetically abundant. Endless good now comes to me in endless ways. This was not arrogance, it was spiritual accuracy. When you recognize that spiritual supply is unlimited, you also start to heal your relationship with receiving. So many people reject wealth subconsciously. They feel guilty asking for more. They self-sabotage. They believe suffering is holy and wealth is corrupt. Florence fought against that programming by declaring that true wealth is not greed, it's gratitude in action. When you receive more, you have more to give. Wealth is a magnifier. Florence never said money would solve every problem, but she believed money, when received in alignment with divine will, could amplify goodness. It allows vision to become reality. It gives freedom, time, and choice, and it's not given randomly. It's drawn in by vibration. You don't beg for it. You become a match for it. This is why spiritual poverty is more dangerous than financial poverty. A poor mindset will drain every dollar, but a wealthy spirit will regenerate resources again and again. Florence often said, "Nothing stands between man and his highest good but doubt and fear." That's the real poverty: doubt in your worth, fear of your power, hesitation in your declaration. The irony is that people think it's humble to live small, but Florence believed true humility is accepting the fullness of your divine design. Rejecting your abundance doesn't serve the world, it delays it. Every time you speak from limitation, you reinforce the programming. But every time you declare truth, "I am provided for," you interrupt it. Florence's teachings in 2025 are more relevant than ever. AI, digital wealth, rapid inflation. All of it points back to one truth: the material world is unstable, but spiritual supply remains infinite, eternal, and unshaken. When you root yourself in that, you no longer panic when banks fail or markets dip. You are connected to something higher than economy. You are connected to source. Florence Scovel Shinn made it very clear in her teachings: fear and prosperity cannot coexist. They are opposite energies, pulling in different directions. While faith draws wealth in, fear pushes it away, and in a world that constantly feeds fear, from the news cycle to everyday conversations, most people are unknowingly blocking their abundance every single day, not through laziness or lack of talent, but through chronic fear. Fear is a contraction. It shrinks your energy, your posture, and your potential. When you're afraid, you speak small, you dream small, and you settle. Florence taught that fear is the root of most failure, not failure of effort, but failure of vibration. And if you're vibrating in fear, no amount of strategy or hard work can override the frequency you're emitting. Wealth is not attracted to desperation. It's attracted to confidence. Many people misunderstand the spiritual dynamic of fear. They think it's a feeling to be managed, but Florence saw it as a creative force, one that could manifest misfortune just as surely as faith could manifest miracles. In her words, fear is only inverted faith. It is faith in evil instead of good. So if you're constantly worried about bills, debt, or survival, you're not being realistic. You're spiritually reinforcing what you don't want. You cannot trick spiritual law. You can say affirmations all day long, but if fear is the dominant emotion underneath your words, then that's the true signal you're sending to the universe. Florence urged people not just to speak positively, but to cleanse their inner world, to confront fear, to replace it with radical trust in divine order. That's where true manifestation begins, not just with the mouth, but with the heart. In 2025, fear has become almost fashionable. Entire industries are built on keeping people in fear. Fear of missing out, fear of failure, fear of rejection, even fear of success. But Florence's wisdom calls this out for what it really is: energetic sabotage. If your spirit is rooted in fear, no opportunity can fully bloom. You'll second guess it, you'll delay, you'll self-destruct, because fear can't hold what faith was designed to carry. Fear also creates distortion. It magnifies problems and blinds you to solutions. When you're afraid, you can't think clearly or receive divine guidance. Florence taught that fear scrambles your spiritual intuition. It makes you forget your authority. It convinces you that you're alone, unsupported, and unworthy. But she fiercely rejected that idea. There is nothing to fear, for there is no power to hurt, she declared, because in spiritual truth you are always protected. A major part of Florence's legacy is the idea that trust is a skill. You don't wait until fear disappears to act. You act in spite of it. You retrain your nervous system. You speak words of power. You surround yourself with truth. And little by little, you begin to move from panic into peace. Wealth cannot live in a body that's in chronic survival mode. So the first step is to rewire your inner world. This is also why Florence insisted that prosperity isn't just a mindset. It's a spiritual identity. You must know who you are. If you believe you're a beggar, you will speak, act, and attract as a beggar. But if you know you are a child of the divine, fear begins to fade. Why? Because you recognize that supply is your inheritance, not a privilege you must earn through suffering or fear-based work. People often wonder why their affirmations aren't working. The truth is, they may be declaring abundance with their lips, but declaring fear with their lives. Florence taught that alignment is everything. If you say, "I trust the process," but live every day in panic, the energy won't match. Your words must be in harmony with your inner state. Otherwise, you're sending two signals at once, and the stronger one, usually fear, will dominate. Another overlooked effect of fear is how it affects decision making. Florence observed that people make their worst financial moves when afraid, jumping into jobs they hate, staying in abusive partnerships, or sabotaging unexpected blessings. Fear clouds judgment, but faith clears it. When you're grounded in trust, you move with wisdom. You don't rush. You don't settle. You attract better because you believe better is possible. Fear also isolates. It convinces you that you're in it alone, that no one's coming to help, and you must grind endlessly to survive. But Florence believed the exact opposite. She taught that when you walk in spiritual alignment, you become supported by invisible forces. Doors open. Connections appear, money flows from unexpected places, but none of that happens when you're frozen in fear. Fear locks the door, faith opens it. There's a hidden arrogance in fear, too, a belief that you must control everything or else all will collapse. Florence called this out. She believed that fear was often rooted in pride, the ego's refusal to surrender. She taught that true power is in letting go and knowing that there's a force wiser and higher than your current circumstances, trusting that the universe knows what it's doing, even when you don't. Florence's teachings don't deny that fear exists, but she insisted it must be overruled by faith, not eliminated entirely, but dethroned. In 2025, with so much collective anxiety, her message is urgent. You cannot build wealth, healing, or purpose while being ruled by fear. The spiritual path is not safe, but it is secure. It's not always easy, but it is always right, and walking that path begins with courageous trust in the unseen. Florence Scovel Shinn's message was never neutral. She was clear, bold, and unapologetic. Your words are spells, cast wisely or cast recklessly. She believed that most people weren't unlucky. They were simply unaware of how powerfully they were cursing their own lives with casual language. Every time you say, "I can't afford that," "I'm not lucky like others," or "I always mess things up," you're not just venting, you're instructing the universe to make it so. Words are vibrations. They carry intent, they shape atmosphere, and Florence taught that the spoken word is the bridge between the spiritual and the physical. Thought is powerful, yes, but when thought becomes word, it begins to build, it constructs, it invites. That's why she warned people to stop speaking what they didn't want, no matter how real it felt, because reality is not fixed, it is flexible, and it responds to the command of the tongue. She would often say, "You must learn to control your words, or your words will control your world." In other words, your mouth is a tool of manifestation. It can speak lack, delay, and struggle, or it can speak wealth, peace, and acceleration. But you can't speak both and expect spiritual law to work. Florence believed that half faith is no faith. You are either blessing your future or binding it. In 2025, many people still use language carelessly, sarcastic remarks, passive-aggressive jokes, statements made just in case. But Florence taught that the universe doesn't understand sarcasm. It understands intention. Every word you speak plants a seed in your subconscious. Repetition waters that seed, and before long, what you've been speaking becomes what you're living. Even modern neuroscience now supports this. The brain listens to the words you say out loud and builds patterns around them. This is called neuroplasticity. When you say, "I'm always broke," your brain begins to filter life in a way that proves that statement true. It overlooks opportunities. It sabotages abundance. It forms habits that match the story you've been speaking. Florence didn't need a lab to understand that she knew it spiritually. That's why she pushed people to speak what they wanted even before they had it. Not because they were lying, but because they were choosing to speak from truth, not circumstance. Truth for Florence was divine order, abundance, health, harmony, supply. Circumstances may change, but spiritual truth is eternal. So when you say, "Money comes to me now," even if your wallet is empty, you're not being delusional. You're aligning with divine truth over human condition. People fear this kind of speaking because it feels arrogant, unrealistic, or naive. But Florence would argue that it's far more dangerous to speak fearfully than it is to speak boldly. Fear-based language might sound safe, but it's spiritually expensive. It costs you faith, it costs you momentum, it costs you miracles. Every time you say something just to protect yourself from disappointment, you're also protecting yourself from breakthrough. Florence gave people permission to declare the impossible, to say, "Everything I touch prospers," even when their business was failing, to say, "I am divinely guided in all decisions," even when they felt lost, because she knew that spiritual law didn't require evidence to activate. It required conviction, and that conviction was anchored in speech. She often told the story of people who reversed bad luck simply by changing their words. One woman she advised stopped saying, "I'm always sick," and started saying, "Divine health flows through me now." Her body healed. Another stopped saying, "I never have enough money," and started saying, "Unexpected income flows to me daily." Within days, she received checks and opportunities. Florence didn't believe that was coincidence. She believed it was law in action. The challenge for most people is emotional honesty. They feel like they're lying if they speak positively while struggling. But Florence taught that faith is not denial, it's redirection. You don't ignore reality. You speak into it. You bless it forward. You look the storm in the face and say, "Peace. Be still." That's not denial. That's dominion. That's the kind of power your words were designed to carry. This is also why Florence urged people to speak in the present tense. Don't say, "I will be rich someday." Say, "I am wealthy now," because the subconscious mind only understands the present. When you speak in future tense, you keep the thing you desire in a constant state of delay. But when you speak in the now, you begin to collapse time. You draw the outcome into your current vibration. Your tongue is either a tool or a trap. Florence was relentless about this. She didn't tolerate idle talk. She didn't entertain self-deprecating language, and she certainly didn't allow pity speak. Her language was deliberate, potent, and focused. In 2025, if you want to break generational patterns, build radical wealth, or transform your reality, you must begin with this: monitor your mouth. Every sentence is a seed. Every word is a prayer. Whether you mean to or not, you're always declaring something. So Florence asked the boldest question of all: if your words were creating your future, and they are, then what are you speaking into existence today? Florence Scovel Shinn was not vague about how miracles happen to her. Miracles were not random events or lucky breaks. They were the natural result of faith, spoken out loud. She believed that faith alone was powerful, but when it was combined with aligned words, miracles became inevitable. Faith is the fuel. Words are the activation. And when the two are fused, reality bends in your favor. In her time, people often misunderstood faith. They thought it was something internal, silent, passive, or even private. But Florence rejected the idea that faith should be hidden. She taught that faith demands expression. It needs to be declared, verbalized, and spoken into the atmosphere. Your words are the evidence that your faith is alive. Without them, faith is a dormant seed waiting for activation. Florence often quoted the Bible, particularly, "Let the weak say, I am strong." Notice, she'd point out, it doesn't say feel strong, it says say I am strong. That distinction mattered because it meant that the spoken word could lead the feeling. You didn't have to wait until you felt strong or confident or healed. You could begin the transformation simply by speaking it. To her, this was the starting point of every miracle. In modern language, we might call this affirmation or verbal alignment. But for Florence, it wasn't just about being positive. It was about activating divine law. When you speak in faith, you're giving permission for higher forces to move. You're stepping into agreement with your highest self, your soul's intention, and the limitless supply of the universe. Your words become a spiritual contract that says, I believe, therefore it shall be done. Florence taught her students to be specific and deliberate in their language. It wasn't enough to say, I hope things work out. That's not faith, that's uncertainty wrapped in politeness. Instead, she instructed people to declare, everything is working out for my highest good. Unexpected doors are opening now. These weren't just hopeful sayings. They were spoken commands built on the foundation of unwavering trust. Miracles, Florence said, are not exceptions to the rule. They are the rule when you're living in divine alignment. And that alignment begins with belief. Spoken boldly, many people today are silently hoping for better. They visualize, they journal, they daydream, but they never open their mouth to declare it out loud. And so their miracle stays in limbo, never released into the physical world. There is creative power in vibration. Scientists now understand what Florence knew intuitively. Sound effects matter. The frequency of your words can literally shift the energy of a room, a person, or even your own body. So when you speak with faith, you're not just encouraging yourself, you're transforming the atmosphere around you. You are giving the unseen a doorway into the scene. Florence never said you had to be loud, dramatic, or theatrical. Faith-filled speech doesn't mean shouting affirmations in the mirror until you're hoarse. It means speaking from a deep place of knowing, calm, unshakable conviction that what you are saying is already yours. Even a whisper spoken in that kind of faith can part spiritual waters. One of her most repeated affirmations was, I now thank God the tide has turned. Notice the elegance and precision. She didn't wait for evidence that the tide was turning. She spoke it before it was visible. That's the essence of miracle activation, declaring change when all you see is the opposite. Faith-backed words reach beyond logic. They leap beyond the five senses. They call things that are not as though they were. Many people say they believe, but their words betray them. They say, I trust God, but then speak all day about what might go wrong. Florence would challenge that contradiction, because if your words don't match your claimed belief, your energy is split, and split energy blocks miracles. She would ask, what are you agreeing with, your faith or your fear? She often gave her clients verbal prescriptions, telling them to repeat certain phrases daily. I am in perfect harmony with my divine assignment. Every plan of mine succeeds because I walk with God. These weren't motivational lines. They were spiritual blueprints designed to shift frequency and open supernatural doors. And those who practiced them reported miraculous results. Jobs, money, healing, reconciliation. Often when all hope seemed lost. Florence knew that faith alone wasn't always enough to break through. Fear can still dominate in silence. That's why she emphasized speaking aloud as the final step of spiritual demonstration. It was your verbal yes to the universe, your act of surrender and strength, and in doing so, you invited forces beyond your comprehension to start working on your behalf. In 2025, we have more access to knowledge than ever before. Coaching, therapy, quantum science, and success strategies, yet still, the secret remains simple. Speak your faith, not your fear. When your words match your belief and your belief is rooted in truth, you become unstoppable. Florence Scovel Shinn didn't just say this as philosophy. She lived it, taught it, and witnessed it produce miracles again and again. So if you've been waiting for a sign, for a breakthrough, for divine timing, this is your moment. The sign isn't in the sky. The breakthrough isn't behind some closed door. The divine timing, it activates the second you open your mouth and speak from your spirit. You don't need to see the path to begin. You don't need to feel worthy to receive. All you need is the courage to align your words with truth. Your voice is not small. It is not weak. It is the echo of divine law on earth. And when you speak it with faith, heaven listens and responds. So speak, not with fear, but with fire. Speak as if your words are writing your future, because they are. Declare wealth. Proclaim healing. Command alignment. Say it out loud. Say it again. Say it until reality can no longer ignore you. Because Florence Scovel Shinn was right. Your voice is your portal to divine riches, and everything you desire is already waiting, just on the other side of your silence.